In our second lecture on the Screwtape Letters, our first lecture being an exploration as to why Lewis uses fiction and so on to communicate spiritual truths and what some background was to the writing of these letters, I would like to give one more background lecture and look at the canvas on which Lewis paints these letters, and that would be Lewis's concept of hell. As I begin this, I would like to maybe say Lewis has a unique ability to communicate with his readers. It was Anthony Trollope in his book Barchester Towers who observed that only the preacher can compel people to sit still and be tortured. I know this isn't true. I know we teachers do it far better because we hold grades over students' heads and we can coerce in a much more robust way. But it does open up the problem. How do you communicate something to somebody else without being manipulative or coercive and so on? And I think the way that C.S. Lewis does is he gets shoulder to shoulder with his reader and he talks about something out here and we begin to capture what he's saying. He moves away and he hasn't made us dependent upon him. He's made us fascinated by the thing itself. There's a word in one of his paragraphs in Letters to Malcolm Chiefly on Prayer, and I want to recite the paragraph to you, but I want to give you the word, and I don't mean to insult your intelligence. You probably know all about this word, but when I first read this particular passage, I had no clue what the word meant. It's the word coruscation. Coruscation. And coruscation means a sudden flash of light. We could look at dark thunderclouds coming our way and we see lightning coruscating in the clouds. Or we can see on a humid summer evening fireflies coruscating in the back garden. So here's what Lewis said. He said, "Gratitude exclaims very properly, 'How good of God to give me this.' But adoration asks, 'What must that being be like whose far off and momentary coruscations are like this? One's mind runs back up the sunbeam to the sun.'" I remember when I first read that, it was when Voyager, the interplanetary probe, happened to be speeding past Saturn, taking pictures of that mysterious planet in our solar system, the one with rings. It was 1979 or 1980, and I remember getting my Time magazine and my National Geographic and looking at those pictures. They were glorious. And they discovered at that time that Saturn has an outer ring, it's called the F ring, and it's braided. It's braided. I remember saying to my friends, "Wow, what must God be like?" asking Lewis's question. Though no human eye had ever seen it, he chose to braid the outer ring of Saturn. I have friends who are physicists. I say, "Why is it braided?" I've heard 5 different answers. Each answer is a negation of the others. I think one day we'll hear it from the physicists, but in the meantime I say, "Wow, what must God be like?" A friend of mine, I shared this with him, and he said, "Yeah, Jerry, we don't know if he didn't just braid it for the picture." I think of ships that park themselves over depths of the Pacific Ocean greater than the light of sun can reach, and they dangle cameras in those depths and they take pictures of fish painted neon bright. Why? Can't be to attract a mate. There's no sight at those depths. Matter of fact, how do fish get together at those depths? That itself is amazing to me. But though no human eye had ever seen it, God chose to paint fish neon bright in the bowels of the ocean. I grew up in Southern California, and I always liked to see palm trees silhouetted against an auburn sunset sky, or a mountain range, or now living in the Midwest, a cornfield silhouetted against an auburn sunset sky. But that too has glory, would one willingly distill it out. But we could have lived on a darkened planet, and we could have gotten word from on high there would be one sunset. And we could have stood on every west coast of every continent and every island on our globe and regaled our progeny of the glory of that great event. But what must God be like that he has made our planet a perpetual kaleidoscope of sunrises and sunsets? And some evening you look at a sunset and you say to your friends, "Look at that," and you realize they're already looking at it because it was a beauty that drew everybody in. It happened to be alert and outside at that moment, and it dissolves before your own eyes. Don't worry about it. There'll be another one. It'll be coming soon. And these coruscations lift up our minds from the sunbeam to the sun. One star twinkling in a night sky, I think, should be enough to awaken wonder in the heart of any right feeling and right thinking individual. But God is so liberal with his glory. He's glittered the night sky with stars and moons and suns and shooting stars and galaxies. And I wish you could have been with me with the Wheaton students when we were at Wheaton's Northwoods campus, Honey Rock, and we watched the northern lights pulsating and coruscating in the night sky in reds and blues and greens. And we did the only thing that seemed appropriate. We worshiped God under that sky and sang hymns of praise. What must God be like that he made delicate things like peacock feathers and butterfly wings and hummingbirds? Why stop there? What must God be like that he allowed earthquakes in Haiti and AIDS babies in Africa? In other words, we not only have to look at the easy things to draw up in worship to God, but can we begin to worship God even for the difficult things? And Lewis is inviting us to do that, actually. He wrote, if our religion is something objective, then we must never avert our eyes from those elements in it which seem puzzling or even repellent. For it is precisely the puzzling or the repellent which conceals what we do not yet know and need to know. Similarly, Lewis writes, where we find a difficulty, we may always expect that a discovery awaits us. We should take note. Those who are ready to reject an idea simply because it's puzzling to them may be rash, especially when history reveals many reasonable people, less quick to discard that very idea, have found some riches in it. Furthermore, an understanding of a moment when it silences discussion and prevents further thought and contemplation may lead to a self-referential and utilitarian approach to truth. Truth is complex. And Lewis says even the doctrine of hell needs to be something that, if we look at it properly, should lead to some kind of worship and adoration of God, if a good God allows that to exist in the universe. It's horrifying in its proportion. We have to acknowledge that. We have to acknowledge that there are mysteries of faith, to be sure, but one must not play the mystery card too quickly. All of us have the experience where we thought there were some things that were just mysteries of the faith, but reading more books, having more conversations, hearing a few more sermons and so on, some of these mysteries began to dissolve into some realities that we could make sense of. And while I believe, since God is big and we're just pea brains, there will be some things that are always beyond our reach. But let's stay inclined, Lewis said. Let's see if we can't figure some things out here. In Revelation chapter 19, verses 1 through 6, where it recounts the last judgment, it basically says, even in hell, we see that there's an occasion for redeemed souls to worship. What do the redeemed see that is harder for us mortals to attend to? Lewis, in the Reflections on the Psalms, reminds us that while Christians cry to God for mercy instead of justice, the psalmist cried to God for justice instead of injustice. But I think there's more here too. In Ephesians chapter 1, we see this remarkable phrase, in love he predestined us. I don't understand the doctrine of predestination. I have ideas about it. I've had long discussions about it. And trying to figure out predestination and sovereignty in its relationship, proper relationship with free will, it's complex. But whatever I think about the doctrine of predestination, it says, in love, he predestined us. And whatever my outcome is, if I come up with an outcome that God's deterministic, then that leads me away from, in love, he predestined us. So even though I don't know the outcome of thought about the doctrine, I know that that doctrine, properly understood, should lead to a sense that God loves us, loves all of us. And I would suggest to you, we could probably say that about any difficult doctrine that we're thinking about. The outcome should be an outcome whereby we see something of the love of God, the glory of God, the wonder of God, the majesty of God, and the grace of God exhibited in that particular doctrine. So let's see if Lewis can help us then. I don't think that he's going to answer all the questions for us. But he might help us to look at it from a fresh angle and benefit by that. And this is the backdrop of the Screwtape Letters. Borrowing from a selection of Lewis's works, we can piece together something of a Lewisian systematic theology of hell. First off, I'd say the fact that God made creatures with capacity for real choices makes something like hell possible and perhaps necessary. At the beginning of The Problem of Pain, in the section on divine omnipotence, Lewis quotes Thomas Aquinas' Summa Theologica, and he says, nothing which implies a contradiction exists in the divine omnipotence. That means God is all-powerful, yes, but even though he's all-powerful, there's some things he cannot do. What do we mean by that? Well, if he's loving, he can't be unloving. If he's just, he can't be unfair. If he's immutable, he can't be capricious. God is all-powerful to do all of that is consistent with his nature, and he can't violate his own nature. If we are faithless, he remains faithful, the scriptures say. That means then he doesn't engage in nonsense. If he makes a universe with particular patterns, sometimes that sets us in conflict with the universe. One time I was out working in the garage and I opened the cupboard door and a pipe wrench fell on the floor. I bent down to pick up the pipe wrench, and when I stood up, I had forgotten the cupboard door was open, and I banged my head against the cupboard door. That particular moment, I let God know what I thought of his universe. Hitting a head on a cupboard door is more of a liability for some of us than others. The Bible says God has the hairs of our head numbered, which means he knows less and less about some of us every day. Do I really want to live in a universe where cupboard doors don't stay where they are? Do I want to park my car at the mall, go shopping, and come out and find that my car is now at some mall in Omaha, Nebraska? No, we live in a stable universe and we're pea-brains. We don't know very much, and sometimes we come in conflict with those things and we blame God. What's your name? You're a big man. What's your name? You. No, you're right there on the end of the aisle. Ron. I don't know about this, if you know this or not, but Ron is a black belt in 17 various forms of martial arts, and he could reach in and pull out my heart and show it to me beating before I die. I don't know if that's true or not, but we'll use it for sake of illustration. And let's say I say something stupid, which I'm fully capable of doing, as my children or my students or my wife. And I say something stupid and Ron takes issue with me, and I get upset and I try and cover over my mistakes with pretense, and I dig a deeper and deeper hole for myself. And finally I'm so furious. As Ron gets ready to leave, I grab that microphone stand over there and I go to hit him, but give me some distance because I don't want him doing any of his martial arts stuff with me. And as I go to hit him over the head with that microphone stand, God intervenes. And he turns the microphone stand into a feather, and it tickles Ron in the back of the head. And he loves to be tickled. He turns around with a big grin, and it's produced the opposite effect of what I wanted it to produce. So I pull out the .357 Magnum I always carry with me, and I fire 2 rounds at Ron, and as the lead bullets leave the barrel of the gun, God has intervened to keep this evil act from happening. And he turns the lead bullets into marshmallows, slows down their speed. They ricochet gently off of his stomach right into his hand. He loves marshmallows. He pops those puppies in his mouth. He's happy. I'm furious. I throw the gun at him. As it tumbles through the air, God turns the gun into a sponge. He's happy because he's going to take a bath tonight. He needs a sponge. I start screaming obscenities, and before the sound waves hit any ears, God dissipates those sound waves completely. What's just happened? If God removes the consequences for the ill use of free will, he also removes free will. And nothing which implies contradiction exists in the divine omnipotence. If God makes creatures of free will, then there are going to be consequences, and hell is a possible consequence. Frederick Buechner, who wrote the book Wishful Thinking, a theological ABC, he said that the existence of hell and the doctrine of hell reveals that it's possible for us to make damn fools of ourselves forever. It's a horrifying doctrine. But we're quick to blame God, and we want to let the people off the hook who are suffering the consequences of actions that they've made. Lewis is turning the whole debate and discussion around.